Dr. Vextal adjusted his 17 pairs of spectacles with all 4 of his primary manipulator appendages, each lens focusing on a different aspect of his life's work. The probability death maze stretched out before them like a cathedral of calculated carnage, humming with the kind of scientific precision that made lesser minds weep tears of inadequacy. "Behold, Professor Kleckmore," Vextal announced, gesturing dramatically at the sprawling facility with 2 of his secondary arms while the other 2 took notes. 47 years of research, 312 failed prototypes, and the complete mathematical modeling of every known species' survival instincts. This, my perpetually pessimistic colleague, is perfection incarnate. Professor Kleckmore clicked his mandibles in what passed for skepticism among his species, consulting his ever-present probability calculator. The statistical likelihood of any organic life form surviving more than 3.7 minutes inside this facility is approximately 0.00001%, accounting for quantum uncertainty and acts of divine intervention. He paused, antennae twitching, which means something will inevitably go catastrophically wrong. The maze itself was a masterpiece of hostile architecture. Active plasma walls that could melt through reinforced titanium shifted and pulsed with deadly precision. Gravity wells capable of compressing a Thraxian battle tank into a marble dotted the floor in seemingly random patterns. The atmosphere had been carefully calibrated to be toxic to 98% of known respiratory systems, while predator drones equipped with reality-warping technology patrolled the upper levels like mechanical angels of death. Every trap has been tested against the survival capabilities of over 4,000 species, Vextal continued, his voice rising with scientific fervor. The Zephyrian shadow dancers with their dimensional phasing abilities lasted 2.1 minutes. The crystalline Moore-Tack Collective, with their distributed consciousness and diamond-hard exoskeletons, managed 3.3 minutes. Even the infamous void stalkers of the Andromeda Spiral, creatures that exist partially outside normal spacetime, succumbed in exactly 3.6 minutes. Kleckmore's calculator whirred and clicked, and yet we're about to test this on a human. A species so primitive they still use combustion engines and haven't even figured out faster than light communication. The probability of meaningful data collection is disturbingly low. Ah, but that's precisely the point, Vextal said, rubbing his hands together with glee. We've tested every apex predator, every evolved superorganism, every species that considers itself the pinnacle of galactic evolution. But we've never tested the maze against something truly, magnificently ordinary. Something so basic that it represents the absolute baseline of survival capability. The human specimen had been acquired from a backwater colony on the Outer Rim, a place so insignificant it didn't even have a proper designation in the galactic registry. Just a series of numbers and letters that roughly translated to that boring rock where nothing interesting happens. The creature was currently secured in holding cell 7, probably wondering why his Tuesday morning had taken such an unusual turn. Besides, Vextal added, the Galactic Research Consortium is paying us 4 million credits for a complete biological response analysis. Even if the test lasts less than 30 seconds, we'll have enough data to publish 17 papers and secure funding for the next decade. Kleckmore's antennae drooped. Something tells me this human is going to ruin both our careers and our understanding of basic physics. Call it pessimistic intuition. Jake Murphy sat in what the aliens probably thought was an intimidating holding cell, but which reminded him mostly of the timeout room at his daughter Emma's elementary school. Same uncomfortable chair, same fluorescent lighting that made everything look vaguely depressing, same general sense that he'd rather be literally anywhere else. The aliens had been poking and prodding him for the better part of 2 hours now, scanning him with devices that beeped importantly, and consulting readouts that apparently told them everything they needed to know about human physiology. Jake had mostly spent the time thinking about Emma's soccer game scheduled for 6 p.m., and whether his ex-wife Rachel would remember to pack the orange slices. Fascinating, Dr. Vextal was saying, waving some kind of bioscanner over Jake's head. Primitive neural architecture, basic cellular regeneration, standard carbon-based metabolism. This specimen represents the absolute minimum threshold for what we might generously call sentient life. Hey, Jake said mildly. I graduated high school, and I finished most of a community college degree before Emma was born. Professor Kleckmore looked up from his calculations. The subject exhibits basic linguistic patterns and appears capable of rudimentary self-awareness. However, physical capabilities remain laughably inadequate. Bone density is 40% below galactic standard, muscle fiber efficiency is primitive, and reflexes test at barely above plant-like levels. Jake checked his watch, a gesture that seemed to fascinate the aliens. Look, guys, I don't want to rush your whole science experiment thing, but I've got places to be. My kid's got a game tonight, and if I miss another one, my ex-wife's going to start using words that'll make your universal translators short-circuit. The two scientists exchanged what Jake assumed were meaningful glances, though it was hard to tell with all the extra eyes and weird-faced tentacles. The specimen appears to be under the delusion that it has agency in this situation, Vextal noted. Shall we begin the wagering pool? This perked up Clickmore considerably. Standard bet structure? Cause of death, time of death, and most entertaining final moments? Naturally. I'm putting 50 credits on plasma incineration within the first 90 seconds. The human's primitive nervous system won't even register the thermal walls before they reduce it to component atoms. Too quick, Clickmore countered. I'm betting on gravitational crushing at the 2-minute mark. Humans evolved in standard gravity, so the variable wells should disorient it completely. It'll walk straight into a compression field and become a very sad pancake. Jake was escorted to an observation deck that overlooked the maze, and he had to admit the aliens had put together something pretty impressive. It looked like someone had taken an industrial warehouse, filled it with every imaginable way to die, and then added some kind of disco lighting system that probably cost more than his annual salary. Behold, Vextal announced, the probability death maze. Your species' limitations will be cataloged with scientific precision as you succumb to forces beyond your comprehension. Jake nodded politely. Looks complicated. You guys got insurance on this thing? Because where I come from, OSHA would have a field day with those exposed plasma conduits. The aliens stared at him blankly. Occupational Safety and Health Administration, Jake explained. They're the folks who make sure construction sites don't kill people accidentally. Well, they try to anyway. Joey Martinez still managed to nail himself to a roof last month, but that's more of a Joey problem than a safety regulation problem. This facility is designed to kill people, Clickmore said slowly. Yeah, but it's designed to kill people on purpose, Jake replied reasonably. That's totally different from accidentally killing people because you didn't put up proper warning signs or safety barriers. Intent matters in liability cases. Jake walked into the maze the same way he walked into any job site, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning for potential hazards, and with the general expression of a man who'd seen enough workplace dangers to know that most of them were more annoying than actually threatening. The first trap activated immediately. Plasma walls erupted from hidden emitters, creating barriers of superheated energy that could melt through starship hulls. The temperature in the corridor spiked to over 3,000 degrees Celsius. According to Vextal's calculations, any organic matter should have been vaporized instantly. Instead, Jake stopped walking and watched the plasma barriers for about 30 seconds. Huh, he said, loud enough for the observation deck's audio pickups to transmit clearly. They're on a timer. Up in the control room, Vextal's confidence experienced its first minor fracture. Timer? What timer? The plasma walls are randomly generated using quantum flux algorithms. There is no pattern. But Jake had already noticed what the quantum flux algorithms apparently hadn't accounted for. The walls pulsed in a rhythm. Not random at all, just complex enough that you had to watch for a while to see it. Kind of like the pattern of traffic lights on his drive to work, or the way the assembly line at the construction supply warehouse operated. Jake counted under his breath, waited for the gap, and walked through. The specimen has achieved first-level penetration, Clickmore announced, his voice carrying the first hint of concern. Probability of survival has increased to 0.003%. The second trap was more sophisticated, a series of gravity wells that created crushing forces strong enough to compact a battle mech into a metal cube. The gravitational fields were invisible, lethal, and mathematically perfect in their coverage of the corridor. Jake stepped into the first gravity well and immediately felt the increased weight pressing down on him. It was like being underwater, but heavier. Like that time he'd had to work on the underwater support columns for the harbor bridge, except the pressure was pushing down instead of in from all sides. "Oh, come on," he muttered, and started walking in the same careful, deliberate way he'd learned for underwater work. Short steps, deliberate movements, using the pressure instead of fighting it. In the control room, alarms were starting to sound. "This is impossible." Vextal sputtered, checking and rechecking his readings. "The gravitational force in that corridor is 15 times standard. The humans should be paced." "Maybe humans are denser than we calculated," Kleckmore suggested, though his probability calculator was making distressed beeping sounds. "Denser? Look at it. It's navigating the gravity wells like it's walking through puddles." Jake had indeed figured out that the gravity fields felt different underfoot, the same way you could tell when you were stepping from concrete onto soft ground, or from dry pavement onto ice. He tested each step, found the stable paths between the worst of the wells, and continued forward like a man who'd spent 15 years learning to work safely in dangerous conditions. Because, fundamentally, that's exactly what he was. Current survival probability has increased to 0.01%, Kleckmore reported. "This is either a statistical anomaly or we're witnessing the heat death of mathematics itself." Dr. Vextal began manually activating additional systems. If the human wanted to play games with physics, fine. Time to see how it handled the really creative traps. The maze's third level introduced atmospheric toxins specifically designed to shut down carbon-based respiratory systems. The air turned a sickly green color and began eating through the metal walls. Any normal creature would have taken one breath and collapsed in convulsions. Jake took one whiff, wrinkled his nose, and held his breath. "Are you kidding me?" Vextal shrieked, watching the displays. "It's treating lethal atmospheric contamination like a swimming pool." "Technically," Kleckmore observed, "humans do demonstrate basic breath-holding capabilities for aquatic activities. Average duration is 60 to 90 seconds. Jake was already looking around for the next section of the maze, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd worked in poorly ventilated spaces before. He'd painted the inside of plenty of tanks and silos where the fumes could knock you out if you weren't careful. You learn to work fast and breathe smart. The Predator drones activated next. Sleek, deadly machines equipped with energy weapons and advanced AI targeting systems. They dropped from the ceiling like mechanical spiders, sensors locking onto Jake's heat signature. Jake saw them coming, pulled off his hard hat, and threw it at the lead drone. The hat bounced off harmlessly, but the drones immediately shifted their targeting to track the projectile. For exactly the 3 seconds Jake needed to duck under their sensor range and keep moving. How did it know to do that? Vextal was pulling at his hair now, which was impressive since his species had evolved past the need for hair millennia ago. The targeting systems are quantum encrypted. There's no way a primitive nervous system could predict their behavioral algorithms. "I don't think it predicted anything," Kleckmore said slowly, watching Jake disappear around a corner. "I think it just threw its hat and got lucky." But Jake's luck was starting to feel less like luck and more like experience. When the reality warping corridors activated, turning the maze into a non-Euclidean nightmare where directions ceased to have meaning, Jake simply followed the emergency exit signs. Because even in an alien death maze, somebody had bothered to install emergency exit signs. Why are there emergency exit signs in a facility designed to kill people? Jake called out cheerfully, his voice echoing through the twisted space. Up in the control room, Vextal and Kleckmore stared at each other. "Building codes," Kleckmore said weakly. "Galactic construction safety requirements mandate clearly marked egress routes in all public structures, regardless of intended purpose." "We built a maze specifically designed to be inescapable," Vextal said, "and we installed exit signs because of bureaucratic paperwork." Jake followed the signs through corridors that folded in on themselves, past walls that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, around corners that led to yesterday morning. The reality warps were impressive, but the exit signs remained perfectly, mundanely 3-dimensional and impossible to argue with. Current survival probability, Clickmore announced in a hollow voice, has reached 0.1%. We are now in uncharted statistical territory. Dr. Vex Tal began frantically overriding safety systems, activating traps that weren't supposed to work together, and combining hazards in ways that violated several interstellar treaties on acceptable research practices. If mathematical probability won't kill this thing, he muttered, then we'll just have to abandon mathematics entirely. The facility's AI started glitching around the time Jake found the maintenance tunnels. Not because Jake was particularly clever about finding them, but because every building Jake had ever worked in had maintenance tunnels, and they were always in more or less the same places, behind the obvious access panels, near the main support columns, and usually marked with some variation of authorized personnel, only in whatever language the local building codes required. Probability cascade failure, the AI announced in a voice that sounded increasingly hysterical. Subject survival rate exceeds mathematical possibility. Recommend immediate evacuation of all personnel. Shut up and run a diagnostic, Vextal snapped, but his hands were shaking as he tried to manually activate every lethal system simultaneously. Plasma walls, gravity wells, toxic atmosphere, predator drones, reality warps, temporal distortion fields, and at least 3 things that were technically classified as war crimes, all activated at once. Jake, meanwhile, was crawling through a maintenance tunnel that ran parallel to the main corridor, following the helpful maintenance diagram helpfully posted on the tunnel wall. The diagram showed the locations of all major systems, including the ones currently trying to kill him, along with their standard maintenance schedules and safety shut-off procedures. "Hey," Jake called out, his voice muffled by the tunnel walls, "you guys know you've got a coolant leak in Section 7? Might want to get that looked at before it damages your quantum flux generators." In the control room, Professor Clickmore was taking detailed notes on what he was mentally categorizing as the day mathematics died. "The human appears to be conducting routine maintenance inspections while navigating our perfect killing machine," he reported to the growing crowd of alien scientists who had gathered to watch the feed. "Current survival probability has exceeded 1% and is climbing steadily." "This is impossible," Dr. Vextal repeated for the 15th time. "We tested this facility against the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The void stalkers of Andromeda, creatures that exist partially outside space-time itself, lasted less than 4 minutes. "Maybe," suggested Dr. Quilp-Nor from the back of the room, "the most dangerous species in the galaxy aren't actually the ones with the most impressive abilities. Maybe they're the ones who are best at not dying from stupid accidents." A horrified silence fell over the assembled scientists. "You're suggesting," Clickmore said slowly, "that survival isn't about power or intelligence or advanced evolution. You're suggesting it's about basic competence." "I'm suggesting," Quilp-Nor replied, "that we may have spent 47 years building the galaxy's most expensive workplace safety training course." Jake emerged from the maintenance tunnels in the maze's final section, checked his watch, and started walking toward what was obviously the exit. Not because he'd solved some complex puzzle or overcome impossible odds, but because exits were usually marked, and this one had a big sign that said exit in 17 languages. "Subject has achieved complete maze penetration," the AI announced. "All defensive systems have failed. Recommend updating risk assessment protocols for species classified as harmlessly primitive." Dr. Vextal looked at the displays showing Jake's vital signs, which had barely elevated above normal resting levels. "He's not even breathing hard," Vextal whispered. Jake walked out of the probability death maze, dusted off his shirt, and checked his watch again. 4 minutes, 23 seconds, he announced. "Not bad. You guys got a vending machine around here?" All that walking made me thirsty. The assembled alien scientists stared at him in complete silence. Several of them were quietly updating their resumes. Dr. Vextal approached Jake with the cautious movements of someone whose entire worldview had just been demolished with basic workplace competence. "How?" he asked simply. Jake shrugged. "How what? You built a bunch of industrial hazards and put them in a building. I've been working around industrial hazards for 15 years. You learn to pay attention. But the plasma walls, the gravity wells, The reality distortion fields. Yeah, those were pretty cool, Jake admitted. The plasma walls were on a timer, the gravity wells felt like working underwater, and the reality thing was weird, but you had exit signs. Plus, your maintenance tunnels were clearly marked and had helpful diagrams. Professor Clickmore stepped forward, his probability calculator smoking slightly. You knew it was a test the entire time, didn't you? Jake gave him a look. Of course I knew it was a test. You think I'm stupid? You abduct a guy, tell him you're going to study his primitive survival responses, and then put him in a room full of death traps. Either it's a test or you're really bad at killing people efficiently. Then why did you participate? You're paying me overtime rates for hazard work, Jake said reasonably. 400 credits an hour, time and a half after 8 hours, double time for anything classified as potentially lethal research participation. I checked the contract before I signed it. I may be a construction worker, but I'm not an idiot. The room erupted in confused alien chittering. Besides, Jake continued, Emma's soccer game isn't until 6. I had time to kill, and this seemed safer than most of the jobs I've worked. At least your safety violations were intentional. Dr. Vex Tal sat down heavily in the nearest chair. 47 years of research. The most sophisticated killing machine ever devised, defeated by basic workplace safety awareness and union overtime regulations. Look on the bright side, Jake said helpfully. You've definitely got some safety issues to work out, but the basic structure is solid. Get an OSHA inspector in here, install some proper ventilation systems, maybe add some guardrails around those gravity wells, and you could probably turn this into a really excellent obstacle course training facility. An obstacle course, Clickmore repeated weakly. Sure. Market it to construction companies, emergency responders, maybe military training programs. The galaxy's most challenging workplace safety course has a nice ring to it. Jake was escorted back to his transport, his hazard pay automatically deposited into his account, and a glowing recommendation letter for his exceptional performance under test conditions added to his employment file. As his ship departed, the alien scientists were left staring at their supposedly perfect killing machine, which Jake had just proven was actually a moderately challenging workplace safety course with pretentious marketing. Dr. Vex Tal began drafting his resignation letter. Professor Clickmore started calculating the probability that other primitive species might also possess this terrifying quality called basic competence. And Jake made it to Emma's soccer game with 20 minutes to spare, treating his afternoon with hostile alien scientists exactly like what it had been. A weird Tuesday at work, with better overtime rates than usual. Emma scored 2 goals, and Jake cheered from the sidelines, never mentioning that he'd spent the afternoon casually strolling through what was supposed to be the most dangerous place in the galaxy. Because honestly, compared to trying to keep up with a 10-year-old soccer schedule, while maintaining a co-parenting relationship with his ex-wife, a bunch of alien death traps barely rated as mildly inconvenient.